Hi everyone, Dr. B here. We're listening to some music by a relative of my wife's named Lauren Olson. He's on the piano and he's been accompanied by Helena Emery on violin. It's from an album called Preludium, and the song, appropriately enough, is called Meditation from the opera Thais. So I just thought that would be an appropriate way to start out tonight. So, turn that down. Okay. So this is finally part 3 of the 3-part sneak preview. And in the previous episode, we went through this example talking about meditation and pain, looking at an experimental design with a control group and a group that meditates to see if it can reduce chronic pain. And so we had this
to the Batmobile.
And so we had entered it into SPSS, made a graph, conducted an independent samples t-test, and explained the results. And as promised, today I want to show you how I did all that. So here's your introduction to SPSS, the program that we're going to be using this semester. So let's start completely from scratch here. Close this up. Please quit. Okay, now I'm going to be showing you how to do this with SPSS using HPU Cloud services, which is, I think, how most of you, if not all of you, will be doing this, will be running SPSS. Just in case you are going to be using a system different than that, whether you have a computer with SPSS on it or you're fortunate enough to have the program yourself, or if you're going to be using it somewhere outside of the cloud, you're going to need to get access to the files that we're going to use. So on our course page, I've created this new link here called SPSS Files. And currently, if you click on that, there is just a single file that we'll be using here today. As we do other stuff with SPSS, when we use data files, I'll be dropping them in here. So this will be a growing resource. So this is the rest. For the rest of you, I'm going to show you how to do it within the cloud. But in case you're doing it elsewhere, your best bet is to come here and download the file to your system. For the rest of us, though, we will go into the cloud. So I'm going to walk you through that from start to scratch. Now, if you haven't yet installed that successfully on your computer, stop now, go get that set up, because I want you to follow along with me and pause this video as needed and run all this that I'm going to demonstrate yourself. Okay? So I'm trusting that you have the cloud working on your system right now, and so I'm going to start from scratch on mine. I have a link for it right here. And I'm running this on a Mac, and that might differ from your system, of course. So I think yours on Windows or wherever will run quite similarly. So I double-click to go into the cloud, and I enter my password. So you'll put your username in there. I trust that you have all this working already. So if you don't, you need to contact the help desk and get this all set up. Okay? So log in as you hopefully already now know how to. And then you will double click on the cloud computer's format. And a Windows window will open up, a Windows 7 window. And okay, so Windows is loaded in the cloud here, and if you haven't discovered this already, you can customize your system a bit. So go nuts. This is a cool kind of system in a lot of ways. It's got some limitations and some kinks that I hope they'll eventually work out. For one thing, it's painfully difficult to get files into and out of this cloud system. For example, if I had a file that I wanted to dump into this window here, I'm not allowed to do it. This window won't access my hard drive or my thumb drives. So you have to be kind of creative in getting your files in and out of the cloud. The best ways are to perhaps email them to yourselves and open up your email within here. I like to use systems called SkyDrive and Dropbox, which I'll probably tell you about another time, and encourage you to get one or both of those systems. They're free. And anyway, so let's see, where we'll start here is with a little bit of file navigation before we open up SPSS. I want you to use the file that I had just mentioned. I have it loaded into the cloud here already. So if you double click on somewhere on your desktop, you should have a link called Computer. If you double click on that, then you should have access to a folder called Teachers. So if you click on Teachers, here's a whole list of a bunch of faculty here, and you're looking for my folder called Brian Metcalf. So if you double click on that, I have a folder called SPSS Files. And there's a handful of files in there currently that we may be using this semester, and others I might dump in here as needed. Again, we're in here for that meditation and pain example. So don't open this, don't double click this if you're following along, and do follow along with me. So pause this and jump in back and forth between these two windows and do these things as if we're all in class and I'm demonstrating to you this in person. So don't double click on that, but copy that. I'm going to right click with my mouse and choose copy. And then on the desktop, there's also you should have a folder with your name, with your username on it. If you double click that, I get this message. I don't know if you get it too. You click OK. And I suggest setting up, in my documents. I suggest setting up a folder system for this class. So, now that I'm in my documents, I suggest right-clicking and creating a new folder. So right-click, New Folder, and give that a very handy-dandy name like Psych 2100. All right, and then I suggest going inside there and doing another folder. Let's create a folder to put our SPSS files in. So let's click right and New Folder. Let's call it SPSS Files. Okay, now let's go inside there, double click on that, and now I'm going to right click and select Paste to dump that file that I had copied in there. So now I've populated that SPSS Files folder with one SPSS file that I'm going to use today. All right, and if I'm going to close this other window to get it out of the way, now I'm done with that one. All right, so now you know a little, now I've got you set up to save some of the work that you're going to be doing in this class in a nice handy location. I do suggest making backups. I don't yet trust the HPU Cloud system. So I would, anything that you do and save here, I suggest somehow getting onto your own system, copy onto your own hard drive, thumb drive, by, again, emailing them to yourself or using a service like Dropbox or SkyDrive to put your cloud files into a different cloud that you can access a little bit more readily from anywhere. Another time, perhaps I'll demonstrate SkyDrive and SkyDrive and Dropbox. Okay, let's double click on this file now and see what happens. So this should, if all goes well, open up SPSS version 21 for us. And we're on a network drive, and at the mercy of the speed to which that will open. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's slow. So once you see this splash screen come up, you know that things are hopefully well on their way. If it's a long time and you don't see the splash screen, then be a little bit patient, but eventually look into why it's not working. If it doesn't open up again, you should consult with the help desk. Okay, if you lived a good life and everything goes well, you'll open up into this window, and there is my data. All right, now let me quickly introduce some things about SPSS, since we have this occasion. It's our first time being in here. So the first thing you probably notice is that the program looks an awful lot like Microsoft Excel or some other spreadsheets. And it does certainly have some similarities, but it does have a great deal of differences too. So we are in what's called the Data View window. If you look down in this corner, it says we're in the Data View tab. There's also a Variable View tab that I'll go to in just a second. So your data, not surprisingly, is going to go in your Data View window. And this is what SPSS is largely expecting from us psychology types who are doing research typically with people. Every person will get a row. Every participant in our study, for example, will get a row. And every column will be something that we know about that person, a variable about that person. We might know many things. For example, we might know their name, and we might have a column with text listing their name. We might know their gender, we might know their age, anyway. All the different variables that we have, all the information that we have for a person would each go in an individual column, a variable column, okay? We're keeping it really simple for this demonstration here. The only two things I know and really care about for these people are what group they're in and what is their pain score at the end of the study. Okay. So, for example, I know that person 1 was in group 0 and they had a pain score of 7. And the next 12 people are all in group 0, and we don't yet see what that group is, and I'll show you in just a second. And then there's 12 people that are in what I'm calling group 1. All right, now SPSS is a stats program. It's a numbers program, all right? It knows numbers. It's not so good with language. It doesn't know words. So I know, and you know, that half of these people are in what's called a control group, and half of them are in what's called an experimental group. Now, SPSS doesn't know those words, control and experimental. So I had to teach it what those words meant. Now, I'll show you how I did that. So let's now just pretend that let's pretend we're starting from scratch. So pretend we're looking at a blank screen here, which is what you'll typically do if you're starting from scratch. So the very first thing I would do is go down to the corner here and click on Variable View. All right? Now, Variable View has now kind of tipped over my scheme. So again, SPSS was wanting every column, every row to be a participant, and every column is something that we know about that participant. But now we're not here to talk about the participants. We're now here to talk about the variables and you're here to teach SPSS about our variables. And so now we're going to have, this is going to be a list of all of our variables. So essentially, what were columns are now rows. All right. So I had 2 columns, and one of them was to tell me what group the person was in. So that's the first variable I see here. And the second column were the pain scores. So starting from scratch, that's what I had to do here. I came in here and I typed group. Now that was just the name that was going to be, I'll show you, that's just the name that's up here at the top. That's really just for you and for me looking at the program. So we keep those short and simple. In fact, SPSS only allows you to put a single string of text in there. You can't use spaces, you can't have numbers or other symbols. So if you want to do what I did and have two words, you got to either just jam them together or put like an underscore in between them, like pain score. So keep those short, sweet, and simple. All right. Now, some of these columns are all of these columns I forgot to mention. These are now variables about the variable, if you will. They're characteristics of the variable. All right. So variables about the variable. So some of these characteristics are cosmetic, I'd say, and some of them are drop dead important. Okay, so cosmetic ones are things like how wide the column's going to be, the alignment, and some of the columns. But some of them are very important. So the name here is important, and I'm going to show you how my brain works in doing this. So I kind of jump around a little bit. So I give it a name. All right. Now that name sometimes might be too short to make sense. It might not make sense to anybody looking at it. It might not make sense to you if you open up the file and look at it later. So I jump over here to the label column towards the middle, and here I can give it a longer label. Let me show you how you can spread this out and view it. See, I've got the double arrow cursor here, and so I can spread this column out to make it wider so I can actually read what I've got in there. So there's the label here it serves, for my purpose, in my mind, two primary purposes. All right, it fleshes out the short name that you've given over here, and then on the printouts it will use these labels instead of these crazy little other names over here that are less than clear. Okay, so that's one thing on all the tables that all the things that you get printouts of. You'll see things by these nice, handier labels. Also, as you're going to see, we're going to make a graph, and I always have my eye on the graph. So these will be the labels that will subsequently be on my graph. So this is a great opportunity, great first place to put them in. So a couple of main reasons why I like to do that. All right, so which group they are is I call treatment conditions. So I'm thinking ahead to my bar graph, and underneath the two bars, I want it to say which treatment condition they're in. All right, and then I'll have one bar for control group and one bar for the experimental meditation group. All right, so treatment condition will go down here. All right. Then on the y-axis, it's going to be telling what their pain score was, what their mean pain scores were for the two groups. So I called that self-report pain score. All right? Okay, so I got labels. All right, then I jump over here to measure, and this is a concept we haven't covered yet. We're soon going to be covering this. Here we have to tell SPSS which scale of measurement that is employed by this variable. Don't worry about what these mean now. We'll get to those soon. So that first variable is what we call a nominal variable. So I had selected nominal in this pull-down menu. Okay, so I selected nominal. When we have selected a nominal variable, which is basically just telling it that there's categories. There's a control category and a experimental category. Well, now here's where I'm going to teach SPSS some words. All right, so again, it just knows numbers. And if you remember, the column on the there here, back to the data view, currently just says zeros or ones. All right, so those are codes for which group they're in, but people who look at this, you people who are looking at it right now, don't know which group 0 is and which group 1 is. And if you open up this file later, even if you did know, you might not remember. So I'd rather have the words there. So I'm going to teach it how to code those numbers into words. So back to the variable view window here. And I do that here in the values column. All right. So that first variable, I click on that little box that was there, and it opens up the value labels. All right. So to get those in there, I had typed in the value, I told it, I'll repeat what I did here. The number 0 shall have the label. Now I click in label and I typed control. All right, and then I added it to the list. And then I did the same for the meditation. I put a 1 up there for the value and typed meditation in here, and then clicked add. When I was done, I had my list. So you don't have to add the quotation marks. SPSS will have done that for you. All right. I'm thinking ahead to my graph. APA style should be nice capitalized terms. I shouldn't use small case C's and M's for control and meditation. All right. So now I have a list. It knows, hey, when there's a 0 in that column, substitute it for the word control, and it's now learned a word, control. And if there's a 1 in that column, substitute it for the word meditation. All right. So you click OK when you have that done. All right. I changed the decimals over here to 0. I don't want any decimal places because the numbers were 0s or 1s, and there's no need to pollute the column with a bunch of, decimal places. So I've turned that to 0. All right, the rest of it's cosmetic and unimportant. Okay, so gave it a name, gave it a group label, gave it a label, told it what scale of measurement it was over here, and then taught it the values. Now I can move on to the next variable. The next variable were the pain scores. And again, I gave it the longer label, self-report pain score. And the scale of measurement is what is the default scale. This is what will be there by default. So I left that alone. All right. I'll be talking about scales of measurement very soon. So this is what's called a ratio scale of measurement, and you'll learn exactly what that means in a week or two. All right. So that's the scale of measurement. Now, when I have a scale of measurement, I know that sounds kind of weird, a scale of measurement, the numbers, the pain scores themselves will be the values. There's no need to teach SPSS any words here, all right? So I don't need to do anything in the values column. So that's all I need to do here, a name, a label, and which scale of measurement it was. Oh, and I changed the decimal places over here. This is fairly cosmetic too, but it's just, I like it. All right, so the pain scores, if you recall, were all whole numbers. I didn't have any, there weren't any decimal places. So why pollute the column with a bunch of decimal places? So let's just truncate them all to 0 decimal places. Okay, so that's all I would need to do here in this variable view tab window. Okay, so now I would go back to the data view, and I would type in these. If I hadn't, I would type these in now. So it's logical to order them in a, you don't have to, I could put these in random order, okay, but it's appealing to you, it's appealing to everybody to see them clumped together, so I put all of the group 0 control people together. The first 12 people were 0s, the second 12 people were all in group 1, the meditation group, okay. So I typed in all those 0s and 1s. Now you might be thinking, and I hope you're thinking, wait a minute, I thought we just got done teaching it words. Where's my words? I don't want to see numbers, I want to see the words. Watch this, folks, this is cool. So right here is this 1A button, and if you point to it long enough, it says it's the value labels. That's a toggle switch, it's an on-off button. So if I turn it on, click it on, and the words showed up, okay? Turn it on, click it off, they go off. So on, off, on, off, on, off, on. Okay? So don't panic, people, if you don't see your labels, all right? Your values. Look for that value labels button and turn them on. Okay. And then likewise, the pain scores were all those were the values themselves, and so I just typed them in a routine sort of way. And there I have my data file. Now if you were doing this from scratch, you would have just spent all this time doing it. You wouldn't want to lose it, especially on an HPU Cloud computer. So this would be a wonderful time to save the work if you hadn't already saved the file. All right, so it's like any program. You can click the save button, or you could pull down file and click save or save as, and go navigate to where you want to save it and save it. All right, so we're opening up a file that's already cooked, so there's no need to save it. So, but that's what we definitely would want to do. Okay, congratulations. You've got your first data file. Now what? You might recall in the presentation the next thing I looked at was a bar graph. It's too hard looking at 24 numbers and making sense of even just a small number of numbers like that. Who had a higher pain score, the control group or the meditation group? I turned it into a bar graph. Okay, so let's make our first bar graph. Watch how fun and simple this is, all right? So right here in the middle of the menus, pull down the graph menu. So select graphs and slide down to chart builder, and you'll open up a window for your chart builder. Now the first time you open this, you'll get this box. SPSS does a wonderful job of filling up the screen with warning boxes and labels like this that are really cryptic and not always really clear to understand. Basically, this is telling us that, hey, it's really important that you set what scale of measurement you have for your variables before you try making a graph. So if you haven't done that, go do that. So we've done that, and we'll always have done that. So I usually turn that off. So I will suggest, maybe I'll let you leave it on as a good reminder. All right? But if you, when you get to the point where you feel like you know what you're doing, you can turn off these reminders by clicking "Don't show this dialog again." Okay? At any rate, let's click OK. All right? So it's going to open up the chart builder window. All right? You can move this thing around and put it wherever you want. So this has our variables up here in a little list. There's only 2 variables, and there they are. It has this white area that I call the canvas. Nice artistic term. This is where we're going to paint our pretty picture. And then I have templates down here for various kinds of, bar graphs, line graphs, scatter plots, histograms. You'll learn a bunch of these as we move on this semester. All right. The default here is bar graph, and I have different kinds of bar graphs, but this simple one here in the corner is the one I want. So I want to get it up in the canvas here. So you can either, I like to do it this way. Click it and drag it like a ghost. Hold down the mouse button and drag it to the canvas and drop it in that window, and it opens up a little template. Now it should also open up this element properties window, and it may be elsewhere on your screen. I like to put it right next to it, and it will remember that for as long as until I move them. All right, so we now have 2 windows to play with. If this is gone, if you accidentally click it, oh my God, I lost it. Here's a button right here in the middle, Element Properties, turns it on and off, on, off, on. Okay, all right. Well, let's populate our graph here. So this is kind of handy dandy and simple here. So I have a template here, and it's got boxes for me to slide my variables into these 2 boxes here. So here we go. The independent variable in this study is the treatment condition that they were placed in. Independent variables traditionally go on this x-axis. So over here, I click on that to highlight it in yellow, hold down the left mouse button, and now I drag that, and you see it like a ghost, dragging along with my mouse, okay? Treatment condition, and I will place that down inside the x-axis box and drop it there. And voila, I get a little template showing the control and meditation group. Now, if you're following along with me, and I hope you are, if yours looks different than mine, relax. It's just a template. This doesn't, the heights of the bars are almost randomly determined. So yours probably look different than mine. That doesn't mean we have done something wrong necessarily yet. Okay? But it should say control and meditation under there now. All right? That's really what matters. So I've dragged that independent variable to the independent variable location. Now it's time to drag the dependent variable of my study, self-report pain scores. So likewise, click on that, turn it yellow, hold the left mouse button down, and drag it like a ghost to the y-axis box and drop it there. Okay. Now, we're going to do a couple things in the element properties window. All right, some of this is cryptic, but follow along with me and it'll be simple. So you might recall I had little TV antennas on top of my 2 skyscrapers. How did I get those? Those were called error bars. All right, so right here in the middle, I have a box for display error bars. So just click in that box to put a check mark in that box, and you can turn it on and off. Okay, so click to put a check box. To click the checkbox for display error bars, and there's 3 types of error bars. Now, in the presentation, if you were really paying attention, remember I had I had standard error bars. Okay, I'm generally not going to use those this semester. We're gonna rely on confidence interval, 95% confidence interval error bars, which is the default choice. It's already selected for me. So you probably don't yet have a clue what 95% confidence error interval bars are. We'll get there. We're going to use those, okay? So notice nothing's happened over in my window yet. In these properties windows, annoyingly enough, nothing gets done until we click apply down here in the button. So click apply and pop, we get error bars in the template. Okay? Two more things I want to do before I'm done with the graph. So I want to check my labels now. Okay, I had already taken the steps to have labels in here, and I want to verify that I've got good labels. So these are good habits to be in. So I want to check that I've got a good label here for this independent variable and a good label for my dependent variable over here. And I do that up here in the properties window by clicking on x-axis 1, bar 1. And it says the axis label will be treatment condition. If you recall, that was the label I gave it when I was doing the variable view thing over here. So I had my eye on the graph. It's now done for me. I don't have to do it now. So treatment condition, perfect. That's exactly what I want. Nothing to change here. Let's make sure we got good y-axis label. So let's click on that, y-axis, and the axis label there. If you recall, I had typed self-report pain score. SPSS came along and it predicted correctly that I want these bars to show the means, the averages, all right? So it's added that word, mean self-report pain score. Perfect, perfect label to have over on my y-axis. So nothing to apply, it's good. We're done. Let's make our graph. So go back to the main chart builder window over here and click the OK button and watch what happens. Now a new window will pop up. Okay, this window might have been lurking in the background and you might have noticed it and wondered what it was. It now comes to the forefront. This is called the output window. So SPSS does things with two windows. You have your data window, the data editor window, and the output window. All right, let's blow that up so we can see that. I'm going to expand it. Fill up more of the screen with that. Okay, now there's going to be two windows, and perhaps oddly enough, when you work with SPSS, you're going to generally have at least two files. So you'll have a data file, which is what we opened, and we'll make some output here, and then we'd save that as a separate file. So it's not like Word or PowerPoint or most programs where your work is all stored in one handy file. SPSS always splits it into two. So you have your data files separate from your output files. So they have to, you have to keep them together manually. It doesn't automatically create one file with both of that content. So I know that's a little bit annoying, but that's a reality of SPSS. Okay, so let's take a look at the output window here. The first thing we see is some painful looking computer code kind of jargon. All right, now SPSS from days ago was a Unix-based computer language kind of program. It predates Windows with pull-down menus and, well, nice graphical windows. So it still is a carryover from those days. Many people who are very advanced with SPSS jump in and do a lot of the coding here. So to make this graph, here's the, it has displayed the code that you would, if you did this manually, you would have typed this in. Okay, so the pull-down system does that all for us now, but it still dumps this code on here. So when you're new at this, this is just garbage. You don't want to print this. It's kind of awkward to look at. Let me teach you how. Let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it so that we don't have to see it and have it scare us. Okay, if you get really advanced with SPSS, you can turn it back on and use it to your heart's delight, but we're not going to use it, so let's get rid of it. And again, I don't want you to print this stuff out and waste paper and ink. So to delete anything in this output window, and sometimes you're going to get output you don't want, click on it. Okay, it's highlighted it with a yellow bar box around it. And take your finger and point it to the sky and press your delete button on your keyboard, and it deletes it. And it's gone. No longer painful. All right, let me show you how, real quickly, let's set this up so we don't ever see that again. All right, so watch and do this carefully. Okay, in the edit window, no, before I tell you anything else, let me show you something else. Both windows have the same menus and icons and everything. So you can generally, you know, as long as you got one data file open and one output file and they match each other, okay, if you're using the same files, if you have several files open, this all falls apart. But as long as you're using a pair, it doesn't matter which window you're in, the menus are the same in each. So don't panic if you are, you know, if you wind up in what you think is a wrong window, all right? So, anyway, let's be in this output box. Pull down the edit menu and select the second to last option, options. Select options. Now be careful here. Obviously, you're setting, you know, you can change options here and you could do some damage and that you might not know how to rectify. So be careful here. Do only what I'm going to tell you to do here. Don't risk too much else. All right? Don't worry, it's not that bad. All right, so notice there's all kinds of things to change here. I want to do something to the viewer, that viewer window. So I'm going to click on this tab to go to viewer. And right down here in the bottom left corner, there's a checkbox by default in here. It's checked to say display commands in the log. That was that gobbledygook code that we just deleted. So the default is to show you that crap. So let's uncheck that, and it will now no longer show me that stuff, all right? It's still there in the background, taking care of business, but we don't need to see it, all right? So uncheck that and click OK. That's all we're going to change here, all right? So from now on, we won't get that code. From now on, when you're in your cloud here, the cloud will remember it for you, and you won't get that code. Okay. All right. Start at the very top here, my output. I like this feature. This might be just, this is simple, but I love it to death. So right now it's showing me the exact data location of the file that's in this output here. So it's using that meditation and pain file, and it's showing you the whole dang pathway. So this is neat because sometimes you'll have many data files as you get more and more advanced in doing this longer and longer. And sometimes you'll be looking at an output file, and like I said, they're separated. So you'll sometimes be wondering, what data file did this come from? Oh my God, what data file did this come from? And there it is. Saves your butt every time. Tells you exactly the name of the file and exactly where to find it. So it's a real lifesaver. So I love that feature. Okay, and if you hadn't saved your work, that would be blank. So that's another reason why before you jump in and start doing stuff like a monkey with a cupcake, save your file. You don't want to lose it, and you want this to be populated with the name and location of the file. Otherwise, this would be blank. All right? Okay, well, there's my graph. And we'll cover making graphs and improving graphs in another file, another presentation. So I'm not going to cover that now. This is getting lengthy enough as it is. But it's not a bad looking graph, but there's things I don't like about it. I hate that gray background. It wastes ink. I think it's ugly. It's dull. I don't like the gray. I would normally fix that and get rid of the gray. I hate this color of the bars. This khaki, olive green drabness, whatever this is, okay? So I would fix that. If the labels weren't already good, I'd fix those. Okay, so anyway, I'll show you another time how to fix the graph up and make it a little bit nicer like I had in the presentation. So, not today. So there's your first bar graph. Pat yourself on the back. You've made a bar graph in SPSS. Not many people can say they know how to do that. You're now on your way to superhero status. Well done. Well done. Okay. If you recall, then we did the inferential tests to find out if there's what's called a significant difference between these two means in these two groups. Was that a significant difference? So how did I do that? So now we're going to pull down the Analyze menu, and this is where most people spend the bulk of their time in SPSS. And in this class, and even if you take the Advanced Stats class, we spend 95% of our time right here in this one. We make graphs next door in this menu, and we do everything else in the Analyze menu for the most part. And in fact, in this class, we're going to spend the vast majority of our time comparing means. That's going to be about the extent to which what we cover in this class. So I want to compare two means here. I want to find out if these means are significantly different. All right. So point to compare means and carefully slide over. If you miss it, you'll lose your options. So carefully slide over. And if you recall, I wanted to do what's called an independent samples t-test. There's 3 types of t-tests we're going to cover in this class, and we'll probably wrap up at the end doing something called a one-way ANOVA. All right? So I want that middle option, independent samples t-test. These two groups are independent of each other. They had nothing to do with each other. They're independent. Okay? And that t-test from that guy from Guinness. The guy from Guinness gave us the t-test. So click on that and we'll open up the Independent Samples T-Test dialog box. Okay, this one's quite simple. All right, let's start up here in the top here. I got my variable window like I did when I was making my graphs, and I have a box here for test variable and grouping variable. All right, the test variable in this example was the pain scores. That's what I was testing. I was testing to see if there was a difference in pain. So I'm going to click on the self-report pain score option, highlight it with yellow, and click this groovy little arrow box to pop it over into that test variable window. So pop. I put the dependent variable. I kind of wish that was the label up here. Those are the terms we use in psychology. This would be the dependent variable, and grouping variable is what we call the independent variable. All right, so let's take care of that. The independent variable here was which treatment condition they were in. So highlight that and click its arrow box to pop it in there. Now there's one more little thing we have to do. We have to define which groups we want. Okay, now we only had 2 groups, but SPSS is smart and it's ready for if we had 3, 4, 5, or as many groups as we want. Okay, we might have had, this experiment might have been more complicated. There might have been a group that got some kind of medication, some pills of some sort. Okay, there might have been a group that did art therapy to see if that reduces pain, and another that did some kind of Freudian thing where they talk about their mothers and talk about their dreams or whatever the hell. Okay, so anyway, I might have multiple groups in my design. I only had 2, so this SPSS should be smart enough to know that, but it's not. $2,000 program, it's not smart enough to remember you only had 2 groups. So I have to define which 2 groups I want. So enough of that. So it says group question mark. It still needs to know something. So click define groups and tell it the codes that you used. You recall I used for the control group, I used the code 0. For the experimental meditation group, I used the code 1. So put those in. It doesn't really matter which order, but logic tells me I should, my sense of symmetry says I should start with 0, and put that in the first group. And group 1 was 0, the control group, and group 2 was 1, the meditation group. Enough said. Then click continue, and you'll notice that the OK button is now ready to go. Okay, we should always look at these buttons and see if there's anything we need to do here. Let's go look at the options. And it's got something to do with 95% confidence intervals, which we don't know anything about yet, so let's not do anything. And missing values, we're not missing any values. We'll never be missing data in this simple course. Okay, this is an introductory course. We're not going to talk about what do you do if you're missing data. We're not going to be missing data ever, so don't worry about this. So cancel out of this or continue. We're not going to change anything in the options. So we're done. We just click OK. And pop, we get 2 tables down below, all right? And I hope these look familiar. These were in the PowerPoint, part 2 of this 3-part preview. So the first box was the descriptive statistics, and the bottom box was the inferential statistics. The independent samples t-test is the inferential statistic that we conducted here. So I'm not going to say more about that now. If what I said in part 2 was iffy and fuzzy, I suggest going and watching at least that part again where I try to explain what's going on with these two tables and try to explain what this sig box meant. That's all I'm going to say now is that I looked at the sig box. I always ask the same question about sig. Is that number sitting there less than our magic number 0.05? Is it less than 0.05? And yes, it is. It's 0.006. And in terms of percent, 0.05 translates to 5%. Therefore, 0.006 translates to 0.6%. There was only a 0.6% chance of seeing this type of difference that we're looking at here. With this amount of difference in this group, and this amount of difference in this group, and this amount of difference between the two groups. It's not just a simple matter of this versus this. It takes into account the variability within this group, and the variability of that group, and the differences between the two skyscrapers themselves. It's a slightly complicated thing. All right, so that's a less than 5% likelihood of that, a 0.6% likelihood, and that is what we called a significant difference. This is beyond what we'd expect to see by chance. That's what a significant difference means. I hear the vacuum cleaners outside the door. That's always the signal whenever we have a night class that it's about time to wrap things up, huh? So let's do just that. So that is how to do a bar graph and a independent samples t-test using this $2,000+ program called SPSS. Congratulations, you've now learned how to do it. There would be one more thing, of course, that we would do before we would leave here, and that would be to save our work. Okay, so this one is a file that we have not saved yet, so let's quickly march through on how I suggest how to do that. So pull down the File menu, and I would say go to Save As. And this should be a fairly standard Windows navigation box that looks like virtually every other navigation box when you're saving programs in other Windows programs. So navigate to where you want to put it. It's taking me to My Documents, which is exactly where I want to be. If you're not there, go find it. And you remember we created a folder called Sci 2100. And inside that, we had SPSS files. And I would suggest, this is my routine, I like to give the output file about the same name as the data file. So they not only, I know they go together, but they'll also appear together in the list here. So that file, the data file, was called meditation and pain something or other, and as soon as I start typing it, it's kind of remembered it here. So I'm going to click on that to have it remember that. But that was the data file with an extension of SAV. That's not the correct extension for the output file, so I'm going to delete that, delete the SAV, okay, and let it use the extension it wants here, SPV, okay? So I'm going to wind up with two files with the exact name first part, and they're going to have two different extensions to distinguish them, and two different icons distinguishing them. Okay, so I'm going to click Save. Let's close SPSS. There went the output window. Now let's close the data window, and I'll get a little dialog box asking me, are you sure you want to quit? If you are like me and you don't like programs always pestering you, are you sure you want to quit? I usually say, don't show this alert again. Yes, I'm sure I want to quit. Do you want to save changes to the following file? And I suppose I don't. I don't, because I didn't make any substantial changes. If you had made changes, of course, save it. Okay, now look. There's the folder containing the two files here, and they have the same name but different extensions. Okay, so one is the input file, if you will, and the other is the output. One's the data, one's the output. And there you go. If that's all you're doing, you can exit the cloud and go about your business. So, congratulations. And this is now giving you a flash forward preview to what we're going to be doing later in the semester. If I went too fast, don't worry if you don't remember all of these steps. You can open this up and repeat it as often as you wish. And we'll cover more and more, and we'll learn how to make better graphs, and we'll learn how to do more inferential tests and all this other kind of stuff. So we'll also cover, we'll have a lot more to say about significant differences and what all that means. If you understood this whole Batman story and what this has to do with the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis, more power to you. But we've got weeks and weeks to get that if you don't, so don't worry too much. All right, here comes the vacuum team. I'm out of here. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.